It's been a month since the midterm elections, but questions remain about the voting process and the outcome in one North Carolina congressional district. And in Wisconsin, Democrats are raising concerns about how the state's Republican legislature is handling the transition of power. Amna Nawaz has details on both states.
Let's start in North Carolina, where election officials last week certified all but one race, the state's 9th congressional district. Democrat Dan McCready trails Republican Mark Harris by roughly 900 votes. That's less than half a percentage point. But an investigation is now underway after officials uncovered what they call irregularities. Lisa Desjardins is here to explain it all. Thank goodness she is. Irregularities. Yeah. What does that mean? What are they looking into?
Specifically here, we're talking mostly about one county, Bladen County, and it's a congressional district, so each county matters a lot. And we're talking about absentee ballots, Amna, two different ways. First, there were workers who were sent out, and there's some 200 or so absentee ballots that have witness signatures. Everyone must be witnessed. Which overlap. We're seeing 7 witnesses on some 150 or so absentee ballots. That might not be suspicious in of itself, but many of these witnesses put down the same address, a 1-bedroom apartment, as their address. So that's raising questions. Then on the other side, there are voters who say a woman came up to their house and asked for their absentee ballot and then took it and said she herself would fill that out. That woman said she was in fact paid by the Republican candidate's campaign, and she didn't know that that is illegal to do, which it is. Now, why do these kind of anecdotes happen all the time? But the issue is here the numbers. In this particular county, we see a margin of victory for these absentee ballots for the Republican that is different than in any other county. We also see a number of absentee ballots that were not actually turned in that is also higher than in other counties. So that's raising a lot of questions.
So it's raising a lot of questions. The Board of Elections is now looking into this, right? Trying to answer some of those questions. So what now? What happens next?
December 21st, there will be a hearing by the election board of the state. They will decide if this election should be certified or if they need to pursue more investigation. And ultimately, Amna, if they're not satisfied, they could call for a new election. It's hard to say if the vote totals will be enough to overcome that 900 vote gap, but there are a lot of questions here.
And a lot we still don't know. So that's one story we're following in North Carolina. Wisconsin is something else you've been looking at. There have been protests at the state capitol. Republican legislators, basically in a lame duck session, right, came in and introduced some sweeping changes, really limiting some of the powers of the incoming governor and attorney general, both of whom are Democrats.
That's right.
What's going on there?
There's a well-known Republican involved here. That is Scott Walker, the outgoing Republican governor. He and the Republican legislature are now, it looks like, ready to push through a very large package of changes that would limit the powers of the incoming Democrats. Let's go through exactly what they're doing. First, this bill would make it so the legislature could replace the attorney general. In some cases, he is litigating, just a committee of the legislature. It would also take away some other powers of the attorney general and some powers of the governor over some state agencies. And Amna, it would shorten the early voting period to no more than 2 weeks in Wisconsin. Right now, cities and towns can have as much as 47 days, but this Republican bill would shorten that period. All of those would have very serious effects potentially.
So if these changes do go through, what would be those effects? What's the impact?
Right. So think about the attorney general. This would be a matter of what do you prosecute? Think about environmental law or not. Also think about things like workplace hazards. On the Republican argument, they say, we think this attorney general might over-litigate. We want the ability to say when we think he's going outside the bounds of the Constitution. But Democrats say this is also about health care. This is also about what that attorney general would do in promoting perhaps the Affordable Care Act. So there are a lot of very real-world issues on the table here. And that early voting, that matters a lot, Amna, because what would happen while rural communities say they want to have the same voting window as everyone else, this would shorten the window probably for urban voters in particular.
Okay, so these are two very specific cases with a lot of details. We still don't yet know how everything is going to play out in North Carolina and in Wisconsin. Are these isolated incidents? How should we think about these right now?
I can hear our viewers screaming at the television, no, because because we've been reporting on this all year. I can look at this list that we put together with our producer, Matt Loftman. This goes back to robocalls that we saw in Florida and Georgia this year. We've seen early voting windows being shortened all around the country for years. And you know, this case in Wisconsin, it sounds unique at first, a Republican legislature or one legislator limiting an incoming governor. But in Michigan, same situation. We also expect later this week the Republican legislature there may try to limit the authorities of the incoming Democratic governor there as well. Now, they have that right, but Democrats say if they pass those laws in Michigan and in Wisconsin, expect that to go to court. And that's where we see all of these things being settled right now. And that's why it's especially important to watch courts. It tells us what voters can do and also what their votes mean.
Similar cases in the past we've seen still playing out in the courts. These will likely be played out there as well.
I think that's right.
Lisa Desjardins, thanks very much.
Sure.